Hi everyone, it's Helen here from Bodywork-Pilates, and this is another in our Can't Do This, Try This series. So what we're looking at is how we can change movements if we've got an issue that prevents us from doing something else. And today we're going to look at the hinge. Now we call it a hip hinge in Pilates. Sometimes it's known as a waiter's bow, or if you're a gym goer or you have been a gym goer, you might recognise it as a bit of a deadlift. And very often, particularly in a gym scenario, you might use weights, but we don't have to. And obviously in our mat work classes, we probably don't most of the time. The thing with the hinge is that it's a really functional movement, and it tends to be the movement that we default to when we perhaps should be squatting. It's quicker than a squat. It takes much less thought, and it's what we tend to do when we're not thinking about our movement. We would love people to, whenever they bent down, to take a pan out of the bottom of the cupboard or to pick up a tin of beans from the bottom shelf in the supermarket. It would be lovely, wouldn't it, if we as instructors could be sure that all of our clients settled their weight, pressed themselves back, moved into a beautiful squat with a long spine, picked up whatever it was, and then stood back up again using the power of their bottom, those glute muscles. But we know that that doesn't happen. So what people tend to do is, rather than going through the whole squat scenario, is they just lean forward. Think about it in terms of cleaning the bath. Okay, so I think we've all experienced the backache that you can get from cleaning a bath, or from simply going over the bath to wash your hair, something like that. And what people tend to do is they'll kind of bend over and they're there for ages, and they're maybe moving their arms, or they're here, and it all gets a little bit loaded onto the lower back. Okay, so they are hinging from their hips, but what they're also doing is rounding their spine, and that's when it all gets a little bit heavy. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at how we can do a hinge really well. Okay, so if you've got cranky old knees and sometimes find squatting a bit of an issue, and therefore you default to a hinge rather than squatting, then this is a great alternative for you. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to be hinging at the hip crease. So the hip crease is that crease that develops when we lift the knee up. So when we're stepping upstairs, you know, anything like that, it's that hip crease either side of the pubic bone. So we're going to be hinging from there, forward flexion from there. And we're going to be particularly working on using the glutes and the hamstrings, so the posterior chain of the body, giving the quads a bit of a breather. Okay, so we're looking to strengthen the back line and taking some of the effort and the workload out of the front. So we want the same sort of stance that we might take for a squat, okay? And we put ourselves into our good position. Now we also need to mention the neck, because the other thing that happens when people do squats and hinges actually is they'll squat or they'll hinge and they'll keep looking forward. So they end up pushing the chin forward, lengthening the front of the neck, compressing the back of the neck. Okay, I really don't want you to do that, because that just gets uncomfortable on the neck after a while. So instead, keep that same space, almost as if you were holding a tennis ball underneath your chin, lightly, and then when you do your hinge or your squat or wherever it is, the head stays in the same position and you keep that same curvature in the back of the neck as well. So that's quite an important point. Okay, so what we're going to do, as I say, is take the feet about hip distance apart, usual stance, make sure you're balanced. You don't have to keep your knees straight, okay? So a little softness, a little give, a little bend in the knee is absolutely fine. But what we do want to do is to keep the same line of the torso. So the same curvature of the spine, the same distance between our bony landmarks, and the same curvature at the back of the neck, okay? So all we're going to do is slightly push the bottom back and think only about flexing, of hinging at the hip. Okay, and some of you, depending on how flexible you are, might feel a little tightening pull in the glutes, across the glutes and down the hamstrings. Okay, and then all you'll do is think about tightening and squeezing there to come back up again. So there's a bit of a squeezy bum moment at the top of the movement. Okay, so again, thinking about keeping the same distances, the same curvature of the spine. Little softness in the knees is absolutely fine, and all we do is just hinge forward as if we were going to pick something up in front of us and then squeeze and stand back up again. You might find it useful to keep that slight tension in the lower abdominal area, belly button down to the pubic bone. But really we want to keep the quality of the movement. The quality of the movement is key. So it's not about how far you come forward. What I tend to see is people trying to go too far. So they'll get so far and it'll be fine, and then for some reason they feel they need to go further, and then they'll start rounding from their upper back and they've lost the quality of their movement, okay? So again, weight stays nice and firm and even. We're tall, hinging at the front of the hip, the chin is slightly drawn in. Think about growing tall, hinging forward from the hips, like a little bow, and then squeezing it back up again, all right? What you do with your arms is your own business. Some people put them on the low back, some people cross them over the chest, some people just let them hang. It doesn't matter as long as you maintain that same curve through the spine. So again, little hinge from the hip, that's the only thing that changes, and then squeeze it back up again. And what we're doing is really working, as I say, the back line of the body. But think about it, if you were bending down to clean the bath, okay? You could bend your knees, maybe put your knees against the edge of the bath, and even put the hand onto your thigh or onto the side of the bath and clean. And then from here, don't then try to twist as well. Move along the length of the bath and then do a bit more. Move along the length of the bath. So you're keeping this long spine. We're holding our weight through the back edge, using those big glute muscles, and then squeezing back up again, coming back up as often as you need to. But it's just an alternative to doing the squat. And as I say, it tends to be the movement we default to when we're not thinking about what we're doing and we don't do a good squat. So I don't want you to swap a good squat for a poor hinge. Swap a good squat for a good hinge, and let's see if we can't just make that feel a little bit more comfortable and strengthen up through the back line of the body. If you've got any questions about that at all, just give me a shout. I'll speak to you soon. Take care.